Today on Recruiting Hell, one of the most requested topics on this show from our listeners is how does LinkedIn work? LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful tool for your networking and for your job search, and thankfully doesn't take nearly as much time as some of the other content platforms out there. Today, we're going to dive into basic LinkedIn strategies that anyone can do with only a small amount of time and effort involved. Using these strategies from some of the biggest names in social media, we're going to look at what you can do when you're starting your network from next to zero. Hello, and welcome to Recruiting Hell. I'm your host, Rob Conlon. Today's episode is something that has been requested rather frequently over the past month or two, and in the interest of making sure that we always listen to listener feedback, I thought it was appropriate to not only do this episode as quickly as was feasible, but also to sort of pair it with the time of year, as it has a lot in common with what you do on LinkedIn, giving and the holiday season. Now, past episodes have told us about networking for the give, being generous with your time, and helping you realize that value needs to be given to your potential network connections before you actually make any asks of them. The same goes for LinkedIn, and whether you have 0 connections, 400 connections, or 4,000 connections, you can use the strategies in this episode to help grow your reach and connect with some pretty amazing new people. The concept ties directly into marketing yourself that is discussed in episodes 12 and 26 of this series. Crafting your LinkedIn brand not only takes time and effort, but you also need to have some direction in where you're headed. So if you need additional ideas on how to market yourself, go listen to those back catalog episodes. Today's format is a slight change from the normal in that we have a guest, but the guest is here as the learner and to drive the conversation. Chelsea Berg is a recent connection of mine that was made through another guest on this show. We were introduced, and with her need for a position, it made a lot of sense to connect with her myself and give her some of the resources here at Recruiting Hell, including being on the show. Chelsea, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here.
Hello.
Now, in this episode, we're going to take a slightly different format than normal. As I said, we're going to take a look at how to leverage posting when you're just starting on LinkedIn. And this is something I know that you just began a few days ago. This is one of these kind of easy to execute strategies that both you and other listeners can pretty much do right off the bat when you stop listening to this program today. So before we start that, let's hear a little bit about you, Chelsea, and your professional and personal journey so far.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Rob, for having me on the show. As you said, my name is Chelsea Berg. I recently got married, so sometimes it feels weird to say my full name still. So my husband and I actually just moved back to the Midwest, the Milwaukee area. We spent the last 2 years traveling and living kind of all over the place. So we spent 14 months abroad, traveling and also volunteering around the entire world, very animal conservation based. We did some ocean conservation volunteer, and then we landed after that in San Diego for a mere 11 months, leading right up until when COVID began. So a perfect storm of situations happened to bring us back to the Midwest for my husband's job. And that kind of explains, the fact that I'm in need for a position, and also why I've spent a good deal of time on LinkedIn looking for work.
Got it. Well, it's quite the ride. And you shared a lot of really interesting and exhilarating things with your travel. I know you've been all over the place, and that kind of brings me to my first point. You've done a lot of moving in your career, if you will, and you've probably gained a much more worldly view than a lot of people. And this is a huge advantage for you because it allows you to connect into some of those communities that you once visited. And you can do that via LinkedIn these days, which is awesome. So you have connections in countries that I don't even have listeners in yet. Now we're in 22 countries, which is awesome, but that gives you something of a handhold in these areas that people like myself or other folks who haven't traveled the world, they might not have that yet. So Chelsea, if I asked you today, if you looked at the LinkedIn connections you have, who are you connected to on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I would say my main LinkedIn connections, they started off as like high school friends or just friends from college and things like that, when everyone first gets their LinkedIn and they just add people they know. And then throughout my travels and everything, all the companies that we volunteered for and even just learned about or made connections with, I connected with them on LinkedIn as well. obviously I did on Instagram and Facebook and things like that as well, but learning about their company profile and page on LinkedIn was important to me as well. So I would say, you can find a lot of ocean conservation companies that we worked for and volunteered for, and then also companies I've worked for in the past, like I'm connected to, Disney on LinkedIn and things like that. So a broad range of, companies and also just people that I know.
Gotcha. Okay. So again, that's the kind of the souvenir I would think from those trips and travels that you kind of put your feelers out and grabbed that onto those companies and maybe those people too as well. Is that correct? The specific people from those
Yeah.
companies? Gotcha.
Yeah, definitely.
Good deal. So then my question for you is, you mentioned initially that, the folks you started with on LinkedIn were the, people in high school. You made your profile and you kind of added some people and things like that. What were your initial thoughts about the LinkedIn platform? The other day, you shared a few thoughts with me about how you first kind of started it, and I wanted to get those out for the rest of the listener base.
Yeah, to be totally honest, my first initial thoughts on LinkedIn were just, this is a job posting platform. This is how I find jobs. This is how I scroll for who's hiring. And, I'm a creative at heart. So I always thought Instagram, like these beautiful pictures and stories, I could really use my creativity. And then Facebook, there was a way to have more informal connections all over the world. And I never thought of LinkedIn as something that I could have, creative energy with, if per se.
Right. And that's a really big leap for a lot of folks, myself included. I was one of those people too who was like, this is a job board. This is a method for me to find new employment, not something that I can actually create on. And I think that statement you made, that it doesn't quite feel like Instagram or some of the other platforms. I think that's a real big thing. And I think that, listener, if you're following this here, that misconception that LinkedIn is just a job board or something like that is a really big thing. So a lot of things, and another misconception that comes along with this is that LinkedIn is a set it and forget it kind of thing that helps you land a job if you're lucky. And of course, as we've been talking about, Chelsea, that's a wrong assumption, because LinkedIn is a platform that is alive. It lives and it breathes a lot like the other platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And speaking of those, listeners, follow the show there if you haven't already. But the real magic of LinkedIn is that it's an effort multiplier. And while it takes a while for it to start to charge up and pay dividends, once it does, it can almost start to self-sustain and self-fuel. So Chelsea, in our first call, I gave you a strategy to try with LinkedIn. And it's a tidbit that Gary Vaynerchuk dropped on one of his videos probably a couple of years ago now. And I've seen this work for me. I picked this up and I've been teaching it to other folks. We mentioned it before on the show, and while it's not 100% new to everyone here, this is the first time we've actually put it into application with somebody, and we're going to drill into it a bit further. So Chelsea, would you be able to explain the concept of the 50-cent LinkedIn strategy?
Yeah, definitely. So how I understood it best was, like you had mentioned, the set it and forget it. You can't use LinkedIn as that if you want to build a personal brand, build a community, and things like that. So how I understood the 50-cent strategy is, at first you might make some posts and 4 people see it, or you might make some, worthwhile comments on brands that you're interested in or companies that you follow. And, over time, the more you do that, on a daily, weekly basis, that's going to build your personal brand. And it's not something that you can just do, once a month or once every couple months, which I was very much guilty of before.
And that's okay. And I think the understanding of how social media really works is something that's not necessarily always made apparent to everybody. A lot of times the marketing world kind of keeps that under wraps so they can use it to make money and things like that. So that's a really great way to kind of explain the 50-cent strategy. It's the commenting or reacting with 25 posts a day, giving your 2 cents, of course. So 25 times 2 is the 50-cent strategy. So going into that a little bit deeper, the reason that we want to interact with the others on the social media platform, which Chelsea, you said is the crux, the pivotal point, though, it's the way that social media works. And many of us have probably heard about what's called the algorithm, and whether it comes from Facebook or YouTube All of these companies and platforms are notorious for keeping their algorithms kind of foggy or changing the things all the time. So basically, to explain to everybody, the algorithm is a platform set of rules and the formulas that determine what gets shown on a social media platform, when, and to whom. And if you can consistently tap into, or heaven forbid, crack the algorithm, then you're in for some crazy success. So with you, Chelsea, you just started back on this route here of posting. You had a fabulous post just last night that I saw, and I was like, man, is she going to teach the master class here when she comes on the show, or is she coming as a learner? Because it was really good. Tell us a little bit about that post, and we can talk a little bit more about like the algorithm and the best practices. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned with my travels, is very focused on animal conservation and ocean conservation. And one thing that really, really impacted me was we did a lot of beach cleanups all over the world and cleaned up tons and tons of trash just on all these beautiful beaches. And so I made a post just in time for, we're a week to Christmas now, about how the holiday season produces so much trash among all us. And we might not realize because the season of giving and it's a very important time of year. And I love, like, Christmas is my absolute favorite time of year. But I really wanted to dive into and also let people know that there are ways to go about it in a little more eco-conscious way. So I made a post allowing people to click on an article that's, 5 ways to be a little bit more earth conscious this Christmas. And I even learned myself. So
And that's a great thing. And LinkedIn can be a platform for learning as well as kind of advertising and saying, hey, I need a job. So when you posted that, the algorithm of the site took that and said, hey, I should show this to people who Chelsea's connected with. So the algorithm basically is described as the preferred best practices that the company wants you to follow to be the participant in their service. And when you adhere to the rules closely by making a great post like you did that had hashtags, that had an article, and that had a decent amount of content body, they start to reward you with reach and putting that on other people's feeds to get more eyes on your content and post. Now, an algorithm, of course, isn't the only thing that dominates what people see on a platform. No siree. The other aspect for LinkedIn, or at least for making content or posts that are innovative and clever and thought-provoking, you have to kind of use that marketing style. And we really saw that in your post, Chelsea. It grabbed me because I was surprised to see it, like, wow, she really put something out so fast. And B, the copy that you put on there, it did suck me right in, which was just outstanding. So we have to kind of use those marketing style techniques to engage with people with what we put out. So we talked about that post, Chelsea. Do you know how many people that reached by chance?
Well, not gonna lie, the first time I looked to see who liked it, it was like my mom and my husband, which, typically happens on, you always have to have your number one fans. But then I saw you saw it and then a couple other people as well. So I think it kind of, reached a couple of people who, like, it's not like my mom or husband have been following my LinkedIn a lot because I don't post often until I met you and had a nice, wonderful conversation about that. So I would say it still has a lower reach just because I am just getting back into the swing of things. But like I said, I did just post it last night. So you never know who could see it.
Right. And the other thing too is it's not just the likes and reactions and things like that you're wanting to take a look at for your post. On LinkedIn, in the left-hand sidebar, if you take a look at, it's usually under your portrait, you can look lower in that menu and you can find a little stat. It'll say views of your post. For example, for me,
Okay.
I had one yesterday, I believe, that is at like 394, which for me is pretty darn good. Usually I run mid hundreds or low 1200s or things like that, which is great. So I'm happy when anything gets 400 or 500 people of reach. So you've had some eyes on your post, and I love that you said it's your mom, it's your dad, it's your husband, it's the guy who's having you on the podcast that's seeing this. There are a
Yeah.
whole lot more people out there who have likely seen, scrolled, and didn't interact with it, which is a great thing. But you still had the impression in their social feed, which is super important. So let's
Yeah.
pretend for a moment you got 6 interactions or something like that, 2 comments, 4 likes and reactions, but you may have had your post delivered to 60, 80, 100 people. So that's 100 pairs of eyes on your post. So the question to ask here is, how do we get more people to look at what we're saying, what we're doing? And so part of the algorithm that we're looking to tap into with the 50 cent strategy is the interaction with others portion. So think about,
Right.
how that works. Right. So did you actually make any comments back to folks who had maybe said anything or anything like that?
So when I originally was looking for the article, I had found a couple that were similar, but I wanted to find something that, looked good for posting strategies and also just, spoke to me and things like that. So as I was looking in the, hashtag sustainable holiday, I made a few comments there, but I definitely need to get better at, when I'm not posting, interacting with others and, companies that I'm just, really fond of or have experience with, it doesn't hurt. And everybody loves interaction nowadays too, especially. It's like we don't get to see each other or, have these community events. So, a little comment goes a long way.
It does. And that's a great little phrase because even on your own post, a little comment goes a long way. You'll often
Ah,
find that folks like myself will make a post. And then once we do, we come into the actual comment section with either like an add-on or something that we didn't actually post in the thing, like the link to the
okay.
article or whatever it might be. That's something that's part of the strategy too, is to get more eyes on that. You can post on yourself occasionally with the 50 cent strategy. Don't let it rely on it, of
Okay.
course. It's usually for others, but one of those, maybe 5 cent or darn, 5 cents doesn't divide evenly into two. 6 cents a day, maybe on your own posts, which is a great thing. So,
I always wondered why celebrities did that. They would post something and then like make a comment on their own post,
right.
a funny phrase or something like that.
Well, and that's kind of them gaming that algorithm because if you make a comment on
Hmm.
someone with a bit of a following's post, it shows up. It gives them an alert. So when folks make a comment on my LinkedIn on my phone, I get notifications every single time. And the other part is if I make a comment on somebody I follow's post, they also send me notifications when other people comment on that post. So it'll say, Rob,
Okay.
you're following John Smith. 48 other people have posted on John Smith's post. So it's a great way to build that interaction. And that's kind of what the 50 cent strategy is all about. It's about getting you in front of more eyes every day on other posts as well as your own. And so by doing this, you're guaranteeing every day you get at least 25 new people to see what you have to say or how you feel about their content. And keep in mind, you may get more mileage out of this for actual comments, of course, than just, thumbs up and things like that. But I
Yeah.
would say for best results, we pair the two, right?
Right.
Good deal. So my next question for you, Chelsea, is dealing with the next part of LinkedIn. We talked about it just a moment ago, marketing yourself a little bit. And I'm curious,
Right.
I don't know much about your marketing background. I know you've done some social media. I know you've done a lot of things like that. To you, what does the phrase write good copy mean?
Yeah, so to me, write good copy is like you had mentioned, you saw my post and everything about it. You liked that there was an article attached, you liked that there was hashtags. And I think writing good copy to me means, getting someone's attention with what you have to say. If you're writing something boring or something that's not authentic or just looks like a robot typed it, people aren't going to be as interested. So write good copy kind of speaks for itself. And you have to write something good to get people's attention, which will eventually help you with, your connections.
Absolutely. And then there's another phrase that I'm curious, and I'm not sure if you know this one, but this is one of my favorite phrases. It's above the fold. Are you familiar with that
Okay.
phrase?
Yeah, I was a journalism major, so I had to learn about that.
Good deal. So enlighten us, please. What does above the fold mean?
Yeah, so above the fold, especially, in marketing terms nowadays with everybody, being online and everything happening on the internet, is it's getting somebody's attention, whether it's to buy something or to read something or to click more or to keep reading the article. You want to get their attention in the first upper half of, the fold per se. So in that first, couple of paragraphs, you want to make sure it's going to allow them to know, what your company is or what you have to say or what your mission statement is, to be able to have them read more, buy more, something like that.
Right, exactly. It's that old marketing term that basically says if you're sending someone a marketing letter, you need to capture their attention before they reach the first trifold in the actual
Yeah.
letter. You
Yep.
have like two sentences sometimes because you have, the address, dear sir, dear madam, and then
Yeah.
blah blah blah, and you have just a handful of sentences, if that, maybe even a handful of words to capture attention. So that is perfect. I'm really glad that you get a great explanation on that. With in modern day, I would say maybe above the scroll, if you will, above
Yeah.
or
Above
above
the
the
scroll.
flick, in that case. So that should be your goal with LinkedIn posts. And I saw that with
Hmm.
what you posted yesterday. I was like, again, kind of blown away, going like, oh man, she said she needs to learn, but I don't know how much she needs to learn. But it's great. It's good to see somebody who is brand new to the platform have a successful post right off the bat. And success is variable on LinkedIn. And the goal of what people post on LinkedIn should be to get people to click that, little read more thing at the side. So
Yeah.
we can together then take a look at kind of what makes a successful post. We talked about yours a moment ago. I want to bring in an example about how to leverage this that really got some traction for me. So I'm going to kind of take the reins here a little bit more than I normally would, just because I want to read this out for folks. A
Yeah.
couple days
For
ago,
sure.
I posted the following post on LinkedIn. It went bananas. And so it says, so many folks want to know how to leverage LinkedIn. And it's one of the most requested topics for recruiting help. Coincidentally, it's why we're doing this episode of the show. Here's what I've done. I'm used to reaching 50 to 100 people a post. And this was 6 months ago. And 6 months later, while I'm not solidly in 4 digits yet, I'm seeing 300 to 1,200 views a post. The three things I try to do to make this go further are A, consistency of posting, B, upping my copy skills and finding what resonates with my listeners and audience, C, networking my ass off to find new folks who I can help and who can help me. Now, my question to you is, Chelsea, in listening to that, where did I put the break? Where was my above the fold portion to have people click read more?
Definitely. So where I saw it, or what captured me, is when you said, here's what I've done, and kind of did a dot, 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 where it allowed people to want to learn more and want to keep reading.
Right. And that's actually precisely where it was. It was that break there. And there's a rule that I follow on this show. I will never withhold any information from somebody's job hunt, but you might have to click a button. That's all in
Yeah.
that case. So you were correct. Right after the ellipses, it gives that prompt to people to find out what I actually did as a strategy. And it kind of pokes that little curiosity button in our brains. So the first part about making a LinkedIn post that starts to go somewhere is taking advantage of that curiosity in human beings and the idea that there is value in that read more section, the fear of missing out on that value, FOMO. So in that case, there were three tips that can help people who are starting out on LinkedIn. The consistency, the
Mm-hmm.
copy, and then the networking with other folks. And again, the 50 cent strategy is part of that. So now that we've given a great example of a post that generates interest, these can be pretty much easily done on any topic, as you showed with your conservation post. That's something that, while I believe in, saving the planet and things like that, it's not as near and dear to my heart as it is to yours, which is excellent. So it's important for somebody who's posting on LinkedIn to find those things that really tap in to what their experience is in the world. For me, it's
Right.
it's this job hunt thing. I'm kind of on a bit of a crusade for this because I've seen that people have been really impacted by what the world is like. And for you, that's an environmental issue. And we are all stronger when we have our causes together and we pursue those causes. So what other kind of posts do you think would resonate with your connections from what you're passionate about, Chelsea?
Yeah, definitely. So the reason I spoke about, the conservation and things like that is with the holidays, like I said, Christmas is a week away. I thought it would really capture people's attention because everybody's buying gifts right now. Everybody's
Yeah.
wrapping presents. So it's also important to do, make posts within the season or within what's going on in the world. I think for me, something that I've been told by a lot of people, and it's just the type of person I am, is I'm a light. They say I'm like the sun. So you're not going to find like negative articles or bad news that's going on. That's just not who I am. That's not authentic to me. So you might find like something good that happens perhaps out of COVID, or something, a good news story of people coming together, in quarantine, and all the good things, that with people driving less, how it's impacting the earth and things like that. So that's the kind of articles that I'm passionate about. And not just articles, but just, posts in general. I recently rescued a puppy named Moose Tracks. So dog related, anything dog related, or maybe something I learned about the pet industry I could share about. Those are the types of things, travel, that I definitely will share.
Excellent. And you have a wide variety of things that are very popular with people there. Pets.
Right.
We know that half the internet's devoted to cat photos. We know that. The travel, people like to see where other people go. That a lot of these things, whether they're in your life or not, are really great topics, things like that. And you have to find again what you're passionate about. You've rattled off a number of things that work perfectly for you, Chelsea. And the other part of that is for the other listeners, these might not be things that are, as you're as on fire about as Chelsea is. The thing that you might be on fire about is, I want to give him a shout here because he's just a great, great guy. I know a gentleman named Ted Carew, and Ted is a career on the job safety instructor, director, kind of like not an OSHA inspector, but the guy who like interfaces with the OSHA inspector and makes sure people don't get their hands cut off. Ted is wild about safety. And while safety is like not my thing, and it's not my passion, watching him post on something that is to most people maybe a little bit something they don't think about every day it's really neat because he is just on fire for this. And so if you're a listener out there saying, my stuff isn't interesting, on LinkedIn, there is an audience for pretty much everything when it comes to professional interests and even some of the personal interests, which is great. Good deal. So there's one thought I want to close with on the 50-cent strategy here, Chelsea, and this is partially for you, but this is also for the rest of the listeners. On LinkedIn, remember that people like you for you. And if they're connected to you, they've already kind of indicated that they want to play the LinkedIn game with you. And if you bring good content to them, they're gonna share it. So we've covered this strategy, and we've kind of seen how these small efforts of interacting with just 25 posts a day can start to pay some dividends. And I certainly hope that you're going to keep that consistency up in the coming days here, even over the holidays, to work to give you some ideas for not only your own content, but other folks out there as well who may connect with you. So the next piece of LinkedIn growth is from kind of an interesting perspective, and I'm going to call this LinkedIn growth from zero. And that part is bringing yourself from zero to somewhere else, some other number that's higher than zero. Another thing is vulnerability. And you and I talked the other day about vulnerability and authenticity, and give us a bit of an overview about what we kind of spoke about there.
Yeah, definitely. So like you had just mentioned, me being passionate about the environment and dogs and Christmas and things like that doesn't mean other people have to, but I'm not going to post about things just because they're popular if it's not something that I'm really passionate about, because people will be able to tell in your posts. And I learned this a lot from other social media platforms like Instagram, like Facebook, where people love hearing about, how you're really feeling and things that you're really passionate about, because they can smell it from a mile away. So when I would post about things, that people know, my fans per se, know that I'm passionate about, they interact more and they're more interested in the content that I have. So on LinkedIn, if you're posting something, that someone could tell that is not coming from your true authentic self, they might just keep scrolling. They might not have interest in that, and they'll just be able to tell and really be able to read, that you're being vulnerable and true to yourself. And people love that kind of stuff, especially, now in 2020, a lot of feelings and emotions are happening through, with everybody. So people want to know about that, and people want to, learn about that and see that in your content.
Right. And I think perhaps we're substituting the actual like physical and, interpersonal emotions with these ones that are kind of filtered through a computer medium, which is interesting. So you touched on everything that I wanted to kind of hear about that, Chelsea, which is great. And that wasn't Thankfully, it was
Yeah.
prompting from me. And one of the biggest mistakes I think that people who make who are new to LinkedIn is that they hold so tightly to that professional feel of the platform.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we should fill it with, conspiracy theories and bad memes with minions and other garbage like you see on Facebook. That's not
Yeah.
what we should do. Right? That platform, it has just gone
So
downhill.
not dog beads?
Well, there's something to things like that. You can be light in your LinkedIn presence. You can. It's actually something that I advise folks when I actually advise them about building brands. Humanizing your brand is posting a meme every once in a while. It really is. But
Yeah.
a lot of folks grip onto, especially with LinkedIn, that it's got to be a professional platform. That is so far from true, because it walks a very unique line between the professional and the personal. And if we let those blend, we can really start to see things kind of gel. So one of my most popular posts of all time was from a few months ago, and it spread further than anything I really could have ever imagined. It was outside of my network. It had, tons of reactions. And I went back the other day and when I was writing this episode, and I looked at what made that post work. I'm going to read that, and we're going to kind of pick that apart together here real quick. So
Okay.
it said, 6 months ago, I made up my mind. I was going to start something for myself. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and that because it was my own, it'd be simple to hang it up if it wasn't performing, making money, or got too challenging. I made myself a promise. If you're going to do one, you're going to do 100. This attitude forced me to look at my new creation as a long-term project, and I'm glad it did, because honestly, I don't want to stop what I'm doing. I love being a content creator, even if there are days that I don't make the best content in the world. It's mine, and it does resonate with people, which makes all the difference in the world. So then, Chelsea, what aspects do you sort of see and hear in that post that might make people connect with it?
Yeah, I really think, when you made that post or when you were speaking to that time frame, 6 months ago, we were all kind of in this similar position. So I think it really allows people to connect with that time frame of, oh my gosh, like everything's closing down, people are out of work. You have to get creative and, start maybe it's not starting a, podcast like you did,
Right.
but just starting something new or following that like gut feeling or following your heart. I really think it's important too. People can connect to that part of time with COVID and everything being shut down, where you have to kind of think on your feet and pivot. And like you did, you tried something new. You followed a gut feeling. You followed your heart and did something that you had thought about before. And I think people can really relate to that in that time frame and how we were all feeling.
Definitely. And I think that's probably the biggest, I want to say heartstring. I do want to say heartstring that is pulled, which is great. And the other part of that too was kind of the way this was structured. And obviously you and I aren't looking at this post together right now, but one of the biggest things was not only the above the fold portion, which was, 2 little sentences. 6 months ago, I decided to start something for myself, ... That spacing, again, that prompt for people to say, ooh, what did you start, Rob? Let's hear about it. That was really, really outstanding. But you're absolutely right. The shared experience of COVID, of having more free time in the world than you know what to do with, is really a driver there. The other thing that I think is really a important aspect that I want to make sure that our listeners get out of this too is the vulnerability. LinkedIn eats up vulnerability like no other. And like you said, people can smell when things aren't right. They can smell it a mile away.
Right.
You have to be authentically vulnerable, and you can't be this drama king or drama queen. Real vulnerability plays exceptionally well with the audience, and talking about facing adversity without being a fiend for attention and adoration is a very real strategy that folks should consider. So I talk about this with the show a lot. I talk about this with my business. I talk about things that are important to me, just like you do, Chelsea. The challenges I face, but there's always, as you said, you're a light. There's always a lining of positivity to it, even if it's me talking about failure. So when folks are posting to LinkedIn, you need to consider the story that you're telling. Is it one of these following things? Is it a redemption arc? Is it a me versus whatever? Is it a before and after? Is it a lesson you've learned? And all of these things can be used to not only drive my content, your content, but content for anybody out there who's listening to engage with people who have connected with them and who are following them. So I'm going to keep going here for just a second, because there is also one other aspect from this post, and that's the inclusion of others. And that
All
post is
right.
talking about my content, but it's also humble enough and maybe aware enough to know that I'm not yet a top tier podcaster. I can create all the content in the world, but I can still, have people consume that. And I'm so thankful for that. It doesn't matter though if I am not humble, if I am not including other people in it. I come across as a pompous jerk. And the professional atmosphere of LinkedIn knows to celebrate worthy achievements like promotions, new jobs, and things like that. But they also very much dive into the humbleness aspect that a lot of people display, which is just a great angle as well. So for those of you listening, let's make sure that we're always humble, we're always very real with our LinkedIn. So Chelsea, I'll put it to you. Any questions about vulnerability, authenticity, or anything you'd like to add?
Oh boy. I think you nailed it on the head there with, that whole post had everything, all encompassing that we discussed. It had an above the fold, wanting people to keep reading. It had vulnerability, it had authenticity. And I guess my question would be, like, how do you, like, for your listeners and for people listening, how do you know when to post, like when is the right time to post something authentic or vulnerable on top of, an interesting article, or like you said, a funny, dog or cat meme? How many posts are you posting that are more vulnerable than just on a regular basis?
Good question. To put that in perspective for like what I do, I try to post on LinkedIn daily. So I do one
Right.
post a day, maybe two. Sometimes I do some that are off the cuff on my phone that aren't scheduled. I use a social media tool for it so I can plan them out in advance, because I want to, I can share the show, I can find articles, it helps me with the running of this whole endeavor. But that doesn't mean that I'm not actually on my phone a few times a day, going through and going, oh, wow, that's really cool. Comment, new post, whatever it might be. The other part of that is you don't always, it's a bit of an art. It really is. You don't always have to be putting out these drama stories, oh, and today I faced this
Yeah.
challenge and things like that. Like, people are going to get sick of that real fast, if you will.
Right.
So you need to mix it into this strategy that you have. And I usually try to do one post that's reflective a week. In that case, maybe
Okay.
maybe I'll creep up to two. But what I try to do, keep the focus on, is here's what I'm doing, here's the successes I'm having, here's how I can help people, here's what challenged me this week. And that might be the post that is the vulnerable one, the one that says, gosh, I was really having a hard time with this episode, and my guest was somebody I had never met before, and I was really nervous about talking to them, or whatever it might be. And that's not in reference to this episode, I promise you, but it's having that common experience. We as human beings look into that common experience and say, I've felt that way before. And that
Right.
tends to get people to dig on it, which is just outstanding. So again, authentic vulnerability. You can't just make up crying wolf stories every week. It has to be real.
Right.
It has to be authentic. Cool.
Well, I can relate to that in the sense, while we were traveling, we were feeling all the emotions. We were far away from home. We were living, there was a point where we lived in a village in Kenya for 3 weeks and, showered out of a bucket. So instead of just posting like, lions and elephants and the stuff that people also like to see, I would post and, we're having a hard time. Like, I miss my comfy bed. I miss clean sheets. I miss, coffee shops. Like, so people enjoyed seeing that vulnerability, like you had mentioned, instead of just, pretty pictures of sunsets and lions, tigers, and bears.
Right. And having, I looked at your Instagram and things like that. Some of your photography is just excellent. It really is. So there's
Thank
a
you.
lot to be, oh yeah, there's a lot to be said about, what, there's a beautiful Savannah sunset or things like that, but also here's a picture of the bucket that is my cleaning apparatus for today. Like, that kind of, that gear shift really works sometimes for creating content on LinkedIn of, well, You had a nice warm shower this morning. I had a lukewarm bucket of river water.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And people can relate to that more as well, or, that's at least what I think is you see these beautiful photos and it kind of makes you like, oh, I wish I was there, instead of, seeing something where it's like, oh, I felt that way before, kind of like you mentioned with your LinkedIn post.
Right. And the other part of that too is, oh, I wish I was there in the beautiful savannah. And then you see the picture of this bucket that is your shower for the day. It's like, do you? Do you really? Can you
Maybe
take that?
not.
I don't want to come across as like a princess or anything, but like showering out of a bucket, that's kind of like a I don't know
Oh,
if that's an appealing thing for me to go on the trip. Now, Chelsea, you mentioned earlier in our conversations before setting up this show, the title of this episode was initially giving on LinkedIn, or networking for the give on LinkedIn. And you said, where's the give in all of this? And you're absolutely right. We haven't talked about that yet. The give is in the vulnerability. And oftentimes on platforms like LinkedIn, we sort of hide our imperfections, and when others come out with what theirs are, that again, showering in a bucket thing, it gives us this environment to sort of air some of our own shortcomings as well. And it's a bit
right.
therapeutic. Yep. Especially in this environment, like you mentioned, COVID-19 put us in a really weird position worldwide. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody post a failing, a shortfall, a defeat, and people start to come out of the woodwork to not only support them, but they also share the setbacks they're dealing with. And it's a little bit weird, but it's kind of crazy at the same time. It's a strange
Yeah.
phenomenon. Yeah. And I don't know if have you seen that by chance?
Um, I definitely have seen that just in, like I said, the social media platforms and the articles I read and things like that, where it talks about, I felt that way too, or that definitely happened to me too. And for once, in a long time, we're all in the same boat. Pre COVID-19, I feel like people were going about their day, they could relate on some things, of course, but now it's kind of like, me too. We all have that same, just your USPS package is taking forever and your Christmas gift probably won't deliver on time. Me too. Like we're all in the same, and obviously you can take that to a business standpoint as well, where people are out of work, or if they're out of work, maybe their businesses aren't doing as well, or maybe they're thriving because you're in, the pet industry. And there's always people out there that have that same connection.
Definitely. And that connection part is really what gives LinkedIn's kind of its power. And that connection also continues with what you do after you post. And we talked about this a little earlier in the episode. And this best practices I want to really share with people, because this is not only based on my personal experience but it's also the research that I've done, that how you look to interact with people on your post should be as heavy as possible for the first hour after it's up. So when people are maybe scrolling LinkedIn at 9 in the morning because they're a little bit bored at work, you should be looking to throw a post out there that maybe catches their eye, but also, like we said, make that first comment. That's called a seed comment in my term. And it's a short snippet. You place it in the comment section to stimulate discussion. And it can be simple as something, right? It can be as simple as the question that I asked recently in the update I made about having a conversation with a recent connection on LinkedIn, which I think was you. I asked, hey, connections, who should folks connect with out there that has given you amazing value on LinkedIn this year? And this little seed comment spawned like 3 or 4 different comment chains that drove engagement. It not only granted visibility to the people that had been linked, but it also opened them up to my own network. And after a couple exchanges, I actually gained like 6 or 7 new connections from just this one comment. So it's a network for the give. So I was like putting that out there to people saying, hey, who else is doing well this year? Let's, kind of name and not shame, but name and honor in this case. And it turned into something that for me paid off big time with some folks that are in networks that I wasn't a part of, which is outstanding. So we see that, interacting with your posts heavily, not only the reactions, but the comments kind of gives back to the networking efforts of others, and showing them that you actually hear their words, because you said this earlier, Chelsea, that the engagement on posts is what makes people continue to do so. And it's not just fluff on your, LinkedIn wall. If you were back in, that's kind of an old throwback to old school Facebook, I think. So, Chelsea, we have covered a lot of ground today, and I've had a couple of pretty big stretches of talking in this show. I don't want to, I want to make sure we balance that out a little bit. One of the questions, that you think that I didn't ask or explain about this topic?
So I would say, from my standpoint, coming from a creative who loves photography and Instagram and Facebook, like we had discussed, and I have a ton of experience there, Instagram stories, and I've even built, 2 business platforms on Instagram. What would you say for someone back into LinkedIn per se, in terms of someone who wants to market themselves, or even someone who maybe started a business and wants to make sure they have all social media platforms covered? How would you advise them, to get started on LinkedIn, to, start connecting with people and start building that personal brand like you had mentioned?
Sure. And that's a really great question, because I can actually speak to that with the recruiting hell page on LinkedIn. So there's my personal page. There's, Rob Conlon, who is, content creator, things like that. You see my picture, but there's also
Yeah.
the actual company page. And that's the first thing I'd recommend anybody. If you have a small endeavor, get your company page on LinkedIn locked down. It's not only a matter of grabbing, kind of the handle or the name, but also you post to that just in the same way that you post to your personal account. With my social media tool that I use, and again, it's just for simplicity for me. You don't have to have a social media tool. This is just to help
Right.
you with time saver. I'm able to post to my regular profile, my business profile, my other business profile for the actual production company that makes this program, as well as my Twitter, my Instagram, all sorts of things with a couple clicks of a button. But the goal is that I have to produce content that is relevant to my audience that follows the actual show page versus maybe what my personal page is or the other social media platforms. So that's number one, is to get that page dialed in, get your logo on it, get a background photo, things like that. Fill in the description, the who we are, what we do, get your website linked up on that. That's all pretty much set up and self-explanatory. You can do that through the LinkedIn platform. The other part about that, though, is that there is the invite button on LinkedIn, and you will have some connections. You want to invite them to like and follow your page. And what I did initially was I strung that out over time. So maybe you have 100 followers on LinkedIn or 100 connections on LinkedIn. You will want to ask them drip by drip, basically, if they want to follow your business page in that case, which is going to be a great thing. I would string these out. You get 100 a month for free, if I'm not mistaken. String these out over the course
Okay.
of weeks. I would just do 10 every single week. Invite 10 people moderately well or have connected with recently to follow your business, follow your page. And that way you don't just blow it all at once. You don't just have,
Right.
I have 150 connections and I invited 100 of them today. And as soon as that refilled next month, I invited the next 50. Well, that doesn't help you very much with kind of the upward growth of your platform. So that would be the other thing, is to invite people. I try to make sure that they have a minimum amount of familiarity with me. Maybe I ran into them at a conference 5 years ago. They're not going to remember who I am, things like that. I try to go with the people I either know personally, the people I've recently connected with, so I'm fresh in their memory, or the people who have been a part of my network and interacted with me for a long time.
Okay.
Good deal. Great question. That's actually something that we didn't cover, and I wasn't, I guess, expecting to cover in this episode. But that's a perfect thing, especially if somebody has a small business or an effort or a passion that they have about that. If you started a conservation group of some sort or whatever it might be,
Right.
that's a great strategy for that, is to kind of slow grow it, but also make sure that you're posting relevant content that goes to people who are going to share this thing with other people who might like that content.
All right.
Good deal. Any
Good to
others that
know.
yeah. Any others that I missed?
Um, I would also be curious, for someone like me who's, looking for a job and is in the market for a job, you mentioned something that I really grasped my attention when we first spoke on the phone, where you said, look for people, not opportunities. And that's a mistake that I maybe have been making, because I'm in this position where I'm like, all right, I'm new, I'm back, in the Midwest. I need to, just apply to jobs, and that's the only way to go about it. And now we're in this position where we can't really meet for coffee, and we can't, go to networking groups. So we're going to have to, like you said, look for people and really connect with people. How would you advise someone asking for a friend, for someone like me who's looking for a job to reach out on LinkedIn or even just connect with, companies I might be interested in or people who I know maybe have, are within their network with companies that I'm passionate about or interested in.
Good question. And a lot of this involves kind of being a little bit brave. That's one of the biggest things that I think I can impart to people out there about LinkedIn is sometimes you just kind of have to jump into the conversation. And that can be a little
Right.
awkward at first. You're going to eventually kind of learn how to just slide yourself in to the conversation. Adding that relevant thought process to conversations about that, folks are showing like, hey, I'm hiring for this. Do you know anybody? You may see something like, do you know somebody who has XYZ computer skills? You may not. It might be you. And the biggest trick, I guess, is to find out how to politely slide onto that post and say, hey, I see that you've got this, that you're hiring for this position or that you're talking about this. Is this something that's a challenge for you? We talked about in one of our interview episodes a couple weeks ago, solving a business problem for somebody. That's the big thing. That's what shows them that you're thinking about them.
Right.
And again, that's a give. So solving a business problem for somebody, let's say they post something like, I'm looking for a piece of software that helps me do X, Y, and Z. And you see this post and you go, I have some experience with evaluating software. Maybe you do. I have some of that. I'm looking for a great social media piece of software. And you say, hey, Jim, this is, you and I don't know each other yet, but in the past, when I've had to deal with managing multiple social media accounts, I've used XYZ. It costs this a month. I have no relation to them, but I had a really great time using their platform. It was intuitive and it might be worth you checking out.
Right.
And again, that's a give. The finding people, you're not necessarily finding a job, you're finding a person who may have a job for you in the future. And
Right.
that's not going to happen right away. I don't want to fool anybody by thinking like, if you do a 50-cent strategy for a week and if you comment on some people's stuff a few times, people are going to say, oh, we should hire that guy. That's not going to happen. This is a long-term strategy, long game kind of thing, like a diet plan or an exercise plan. You don't generally see results on day 1 or even maybe day 100. Excellent. Well, Chelsea, you and I don't think we have any more questions to share with folks today. I really want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And this was kind of a last minute episode. It's definitely been a shorter timetable for production than I normally try to give a guest. And I want to thank you for stepping out of your comfort zone and kind of being on your first podcast here. Certainly hope it helps your networking efforts. If people wanted to find out more, if people wanted to find out more about you, who you are, what you do, how you can add to their networks or their ventures, or maybe some of the neat stuff you've done in the past, where would they find you out on social media or the internet?
Yeah, definitely. So right now, my personal account, my personal brand is where I do the most posting. You can learn about my puppy named Moose Tracks and just kind of the things I do living back in the beautiful Midwest, back in Pewaukee, Wisconsin here. So my Instagram handle is @ChelseaWandering. And the wandering came from when we were doing all of that travel. Obviously, I'm a little more put now. And then Chelsea Berg on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. And as somebody who is a native of Heartland, Wisconsin, I feel a little bit of animosity when you mention Pewaukee for some reason.
Oh, no.
Neighboring towns. It's all good. All right. Well, excellent. And again, folks, stop by her Instagram, connect with her on LinkedIn. If there are opportunities that you know of that might fit somebody who has some pretty impressive social media skills and built some brands herself, definitely connect out there and network for the give yourself here come these next few weeks. Well, Chelsea, thanks again for swinging by and for being a part of our show this week. Closing out for us here at Recruiting Hell, it is the holidays, and I want to take the time to do 2 quick things. The first, it is my genuine hope that your holidays are the brightest they can be. And even though this year may be a rather lonelier set of holidays than usual for some folks, if you're in that situation, I invite you to reach out. Check up on your people and make sure people check up on you. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And even though we can't be as close as we want to be this year, remember that there are people in this world who love you. The second is to give you the gift of no promotions at the end of this show. For one episode, I want to put aside the thought of growing the audience or any other aspect of this show and just appreciate what we have right now, because I am truly, truly happy with all of you who are listening to this right at this moment. Thank you to every single one of you, whether it's your first listen today or your 50th because you started listening to things again, for coming to this show week in and week out. It has made my 2020 one of the best years it could possibly be, given the circumstances. And knowing that there are people who listen to this show, decided it was worthwhile, who got jobs from it, and who continue to generously support this show to this very day, fills me with an incredible amount of joy. Recruiting Hell is a production of Westport Studios and is proudly made in Wisconsin. And finally, as always, a big thank you to Purple Planet Music for our themes, and you, the listener, for tuning in. I'm Rob Conlon, and until we meet again, keep moving forward with your self-betterment and your job hunt. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And Recruiting Hell will be here to help you keep pace. Happy holidays from my family to yours.